Welcome to the Hong Kong On Screen podcast, brought to you by Hong Kong On Screen, a Los Angeles-based non-profit organization promoting films and culture of Hong Kong.
Hello, welcome back to our Hong Kong On Screen podcast. Today we have a very special guest with us. We have Professor Joseph Lee from Pace University, and he is a professor of history. Professor Lee, why don't you introduce yourself a little bit?
Yeah, sure. Thank you. Thanks for having me. I'm Joseph Lee. I teach history at Pace University, and I'm also running a research institute called the Global Asia Institute at Pace. I think my research actually deal with the history of China, and occasionally I teach courses on Hong Kong, film industry, the history of Hong Kong film industry at my university as well. So I'm very happy here today just to talk to you about the very famous movie, The 10 Years.
Of course, yeah, we're very glad to have you as well. So yeah, today we're going to talk about 10 Years, Sub Nin, which is, as you said, both a very famous movie and in some circles, an infamous movie. 10 Years is an anthology film comprised of 5 short films made in 2015. And it was a big deal back when it came out, and it still is a big deal, continues to be a big deal today. It's most known for both the big political statements it makes in the movie, including some very taboo topics like Hong Kong independence today, and also the waves and noise it made back then in community screenings and finally winning the best film from the Hong Kong Film Awards. And it was quite a scandal at that time. So to give you a brief summary of the kind of style and the content of 10 Years, 10 Years is comprised of 5 short films, and the first short film is called Extras, 法瓜, and it is a kind of psychological thriller in black and white about 2 lower-class men who have been hired by triads, by gangsters, by organized crime, to assassinate 2 pro-Beijing politicians at a kind of community event. And it is kind of a commentary on the hypocrisy of China-controlled Hong Kong politics back then and legislative politics, and which have kind of turned out to become reality. More on that later. And the second short is called Dongxi, Season of the End, and it is a kind of very poetic art house rumination on a couple's relationship in a dystopian 2025 Hong Kong. In the short, the husband asks the wife to turn him into a sample forever and freeze his body forever. And that is the main plot of the short. Professor Lee, why don't you introduce to us the rest of the remaining shorts?
Yeah, sure. I think the third one is the Dialect. I think it actually talk about the extinction of the Cantonese language. But I think the larger narrative, in that film is, how the marginalizations of Cantonese as a language and culture, it also resonates with the whole rejections of the political rights of the Hong Kong citizens, in the post-colonial era. So I think, the dialect itself, I think it actually gives us a linguistic dimension to understanding the Hong Kong-China relationship since 1997. I think the fourth one is called Self-Immolator. I would say that one is actually the most provocative and also the most challenging film, within the 10 year series. It really talked about the debate regarding the use of political strategies, to fight for Hong Kong's right, and also to demand freedom, and even to talk about political independence as well. So it is a kind of very emotional and also a very politically charged subjects in Hong Kong after 1997. And I think the film, it also, reveals some very graphical illustration of, using self-immolation as a way to make a political statement in Hong Kong. So I think that film actually definitely had a very powerful political message. The last one is Local Aids. It talked about it actually give a very strong criticism of the neoliberal economy in Hong Kong, but at the same time it also show how some of the working class people who live in the working class neighborhood, how they actually build solidarity the fight against censorship and also propaganda, political propaganda, and also indoctrination among Hong Kong's children. So this is actually a very general overview of the contents, of these 5 films.
Right, so Dialect, 方言, is kind of like a comedy, almost like a series of sketches about this taxi driver who is failing to meet new requirements to become Mandarin certified, to provide Mandarin services to passengers in what was a once Cantonese-dominated city. 自焚者, Self-Immolator is the 4th one. The most challenging one is a kind of mockumentary or pseudo-documentary about the first political prisoner in Hong Kong and the first to kill himself, and he advocates for Hong Kong independence, and in the short itself there are slogans of Hong Kong independence as well as other fake academics commenting on the idea of Hong Kong independence. And finally, Local Lake Bunde Dan is kind of like a heartwarming family drama in the likes of Hirokatsu Koreeda, and it's a nice cap off to the end. It's about a father who can no longer sell local eggs because the word local has been banned for political sensitivity reasons, and then he tries to educate his son to kind of have faith in the future. In general, all of the films revolve around this idea of predicting the future of Hong Kong in 10 years. So it was made in 2015, so it is roughly around 2025, the future in 2025, even though actually some of the films take place closer to like 2020 or 2019, that period. But it is kind of like a dystopian 10 years later prediction kind of concept. And I think one of the most famous things now about the film is that how eerily those predictions have come true. Not even 10 years in the future, we're only 7 years into the future, and many of the predictions in the movie have already come true. So talking about this film, it is impossible to avoid the elephant in the room, which is what has kind of stolen most of the debate of the film in the local online community, at least, which is the best film in the Hong Kong Film Awards. So in 2016, it won Best Film in the Hong Kong Film Awards, the top prize, even though it was the only award it won that night, and I believe also its only nomination. And it beat another film called 踏血尋梅, Port of Call, which was kind of a more traditional movie that already won Best Actor, Actress, Supporting Actress, like all the other awards. So it was seen as the favorite to win Best Picture, and then suddenly 10 years at the end of the night won Best Film. And obviously because of the political content of the movie, it made a lot of noise, and a lot of industry figures like kind of studio CEOs, they came out to reject this, and they said this is a total disgrace to the Hong Kong film industry, etc. So my first question to you, Professor Lee, is do you think 10 Years deserved to win Best Film in the Hong Kong Film Awards? Do you think it has artistic merit, or is it just kind of like an empty political gesture?
No, I think that's actually a very good question. I think it actually brings back to, I think the moment, I think if we actually watch, that film, award on YouTube, you can actually see the reactions, from the audience. And I think one powerful image was, I think that event, it was the first time, I think the Hong Kong Film, award, it was not broadcast in China. So I think the reaction from mainland China, it actually revealed the kind of anxiety and also the political anxiety on the Chinese officials towards the political subtext of the film. I think that was actually an amazing film, in terms of its conceptualization. I think if you think about each individual topics, how this actually come together as a kind of, coherent and also organic whole, structure. But what is more important is I think the producers of the 10 Years project, they actually articulate these ideas of, trying to rethink and reimagine your home society, your home country in 10 years' time. I think that actually revealed the first serious effort to use film to navigate and also to talk about crisis in your home society, in your home country. So I think the conceptualization itself, it was quite remarkable compared with other Hong Kong art house cinema and also Hong Kong, commercial film, over the last few decades. And of course, I think the actings and all the copy editing itself, I think that each one is so different, but at the same time, they all point to the subject about Hong Kong identity, since 1997.
Right. I also agree that this might be a hot take or a controversial opinion, but I fully agree that 10 Years has a lot of artistic merit and totally deserved to win Best Film from the Hong Kong Film Awards. From a technical standpoint, a lot of people online say, 10 Years is only student film quality, and it's kind of an embarrassment compared to the other films nominated or other films that have won Best Film in the Hong Kong Film Awards in the past. And I think that's totally untrue. I think if you look at 10 Years, there is an amazing kind of confidence in the way it is projecting its message and its vision. The vision is so complete and professional, and it really is above other similar projects in Hong Kong, because the anthology movie is not a new concept in Hong Kong cinema at all, and other new waves of cinema. I think we've talked about this a little bit in another episode of the podcast, but you have a lot of anthology films coming up from Hong Kong. Like there's another one released around the same time, also by new directors, called Good Time. And then obviously this year there's Septet, a story from Hong Kong by the veteran directors of Hong Kong. And I think none of them have the kind of amazing brazen confidence and complete package that 10 Years has. And in each individual short, we see a lot of promising stylistic features as well. Like in Fao Gua Extras, the first one, the black and white thriller, I think it is a great thriller, and it really keeps you on the edge of the seat. And the framing there is very precise, and it shows a lot of awareness of class. It shows a lot of awareness of the space and how to frame things to make them more interesting. And these are all things that I believe totally have artistic merit. And obviously, I think Ji Fanze, Self-Immolator, the most famous one, the mockumentary style, the challenging of the audience, and the blurring the line between fictionality and reality is totally amazing. And I don't think a lot of Hong Kong films have actually done that in the past. I mean, there are some, but by the masters. So I think 10 Years totally deserved to win that award that night, and I hope to clear the air that it is not just a political thing. It actually is a film worthy of looking at itself as well.
Yeah, and also to add on that, because I think if you look at the selection criteria, I believe that I think the award was actually chosen by the film professional themselves. So I think they really look at it from their own professional perspective. So I guess looking at that award in that year, I think it's legitimate, it's fair. I don't see why not. I think it's actually the new political environment that actually get people to ask all these kind of question about the legitimacy of the award.
Yeah, of course, and like you say, it's hugely ironic that actually the voters themselves voted for that film, totally believing whatever reason behind it, they voted for it, and then after that they came out to decry it, to reject it, it's a whole circus show. And let's talk about the first most important thing first, which is how does 10 Years and how do the shorts in 10 Years, 5 of them, reflect the kind of anxieties and concerns of Hong Kongers in the post-umbrella movement landscape, as well as now the post-2019 anti-extradition bill protests landscape?
Yeah, I can think of two things actually, because I actually use this film as a kind of historical film in my class, in my history class. So it actually raised some fundamental question about, the identity politics. Okay, I think that's the first thing. The identity politics, in Hong Kong. What actually constitute the Hong Kong Cantonese identity, or even a Hong Kong cosmopolitan identity that not only includes the Cantonese-speaking population, but also some other non-Chinese minority who have lived and also contribute to Hong Kong's development. I think in Extra and also in Self-Immolator, I think you do see some representations of South Asian Hong Kongers. So it actually widened the whole discussion about what constitute Hong Kongers in the 21st century. Yeah, and I would say the second thing is really about the severity of political crisis. I think each one of the film also asks important question about life and death situation. So whenever we think about political crisis, yeah, it is almost like a life and death situation for the people who are facing it. So I guess, the representations of, the political crisis, it also resonate with the anxiety and also the concern of the local audience who watch the film.
Right. And yeah, for me, I think it is a very accurate depiction and kind of crystallization of the post-umbrella movement era of Hong Kong politics from 2014 to 2019. There was this sense of dread and bleakness and foreboding and hopelessness that was very prevalent in those years after the umbrella movements that left the democracy movements not knowing what to do, and those years of desperation and seeking for direction. And you can really see those anxieties reflected in 10 years. And it's also in other Hong Kong movies at that time, like surprisingly, this movie called She Remembers, He Forgets, 哪一天我們會飛 by director Adam Wong. Also another post-umbrella movie that no longer has the hope of the pre-umbrella movement period and has more bleakness and admittance of defeat. And obviously right now it has a renewed relevance in the post-2019 landscape, because right now we are in another era that is after unsuccessful protest movement, and we are gathering our resources, we are reflecting on ourselves and wondering what went wrong, what went right, and it is exactly that same feeling and mood again. And I think 10 Years is once again a film that we should all look towards too. And I find it very interesting that you use it in history class, because if you think about historical movies, you would think about movies like Schindler's List, which are about movies that about things that happened in the past. But 10 Years is actually a prediction of the future. But actually, it is also very applicable as a historical film, which I think is totally ingenious.
Yeah, No, I think you actually make a very nice way, to divide, these two distinct periods, of finding meaning, in the movie 10 Years, the post-umbrella and also the post-2019, 2020. Yeah, definitely. I think when you think about the historical timeline, I think the 10 Years project really collapsed this, dividing line between the past, the present, and also the future. They are actually looking at the failure of the first umbrella protest. It was very disappointing. But at the same time, they are also hoping to reimagine, a more hopeful future as well. So the past and the present and the future, I think they are all interconnected. So I think the director themselves, I think they are really careful and also very smart to challenge the audience to move beyond from that past disappointment, and at the same time trying to think carefully about what they can achieve in order to have a more hopeful future.
Right, let's talk a bit about the producing context of the movie. So 10 Years is not only a very special movie because of the content of the movie itself, but also because of the larger environment in which it was produced and made and exhibited. 10 Years quite famously bypassed a traditional commercial theatrical release and went into kind of local community screenings instead. So Professor Lee, can you tell us a little bit about these distribution methods and strategies that the 10 Years team used, and how did they achieve the success of spreading their awareness and maybe even making back their production costs?
Yeah, no, thank you. I think that's a very good observation about, I think the reception, the popular receptions of the 10 Years, in the local community. I guess, once, the film was actually being produced, I think they encountered lots of, institutional censorship. I think many commercial movie theater in Hong Kong feel reluctant, to carry the film. So I think the production team, I think they use some of, the local community network, the school network, the church network, to make the film screening as a kind of, community-based festival. So I think that it turned out that was a very effective strategy, because it actually helped to bring the movie to some grassroots community across all the 18 districts of Hong Kong. So it actually keep alive the conversation. And it also allowed the movie director and also the production team to have a one-on-one direct engagement with the audience as well. So even though it was a post-umbrella era, but it actually kept the memory of that struggle alive through the community-based screening. So I think that part was really smart. The second thing is actually they also make good use of the social media. I think at one point, I think the film was also carried by Netflix in the United States. So it actually helped to reach an international audience as well. I guess, I think when the political climate was fine, it was okay to use the community screening, as a kind of new practice to bypass the censorship. But once that option was not there, then I think the social media platform could be a very useful alternative.
Yeah, definitely. And nowadays, all of those screenings would be impossible. Like just a few months ago, one of the local organizers tried to screen The Dark Knight, the Batman movie from 2008, which was partially shot in Hong Kong and only received a 2A, like a PG rating from the Hong Kong censorship board, and it was banned because of various reasons, political reasons, and both they claim it's like on-screen violence or whatever. But this is like unheard of, and the goalposts of censorship in Hong Kong are being moved every day. So that's why when you watch the movie, it's actually really ironic that in the credits you can see some of the local government departments like LCSD, Leisure and Cultural Services Department, thanked in the credits. So it's totally ironic that you could see government departments being thanked and potentially, helped the film into production. Nowadays, that would never happen. I think it predicted the national security law before the term national security law meant anything to Hong Kongers. And it's a really harrowing reality that Hong Kong independent filmmaking faces nowadays. And the distributor Golden Scene also is very intrepid in the way it continues to distribute movies with an independent spirit. Let's not say political content because it's not really true anymore, but still with a grassroots, like you say, a grassroots, native, indigenous, localist spirit. And you can see those still in Hong Kong cinema surviving today and the far-reaching impact of 10 years to movie.
Yeah, and also, no, I think you make an excellent point because I think of the increasing, political challenges. I think for the movie director nowadays, whether they're based in Hong Kong and abroad, they really have to think global, right? I think, whatever they produce are really towards the global audience. And so I guess, the kind of conceptualization and also the selections of the topic and subject matter, it must have that kind of universal application and also the universal appeal.
Right, and I think what you're talking about, the 10 years being on Netflix, streaming has totally exploded in Hong Kong during the COVID lockdowns, and both Netflix and Disney Plus are now major players in the Hong Kong streaming landscape. And this is totally something that 10 years almost kind of pioneered, and nowadays you can see a lot of Hong Kong movies being uploaded to streaming platforms or acquired by streaming platforms, such as recently Warriors of Future, 明日戰記, which is a totally huge, giant blockbuster, but it was acquired by Netflix for global distribution. And this is something that 10 years figured out 7 years ago. And also, a lot of Hong Kong filmmakers, because of the broken relationship with the Chinese market, we are now looking at more global markets for distribution and success and financial returns, like Southeast Asian markets. So you can see production companies like View, the right now the second biggest TV station in Hong Kong, actively trying to expand into the Southeast Asian market and other global markets. So you can totally see how 10 years also, was very bold in the way it distributed this movie. And I have no idea if it made its money back or not, but I think it was, on a cultural level, totally a success.
Absolutely, I think, and also on a professional level as well, because I think, even though they lost the domestic market, they actually won the global market, and they actually, rediscovered the importance of the international audience. And also I believe that I think for the 10 years, they also inspire other regional movie directors, to make 10 years for their own country as well. 10 years Taiwan, 10 years Japan, and also there's one 10 years Thailand. So I guess, 10 years as a kind of, concept or cinematic paradigm, that could also be reproduced elsewhere.
Right. Let's talk a bit about the 10 years project. So after 10 years, the movie, the 2015 Hong Kong one, it became a global project for other filmmakers in other countries to also make an anthology movies of shorts predicting their societies 10 years in the future and the problems that those countries are facing. And these projects include 10 Years Thailand, 10 Years Japan, 10 Years South Korea, and 10 Years Taiwan. And actually, they have some pretty high-profile backing. Like the Japanese version has the backing of Hirokatsu Koreeda, which is the number one director in Japan right now. And also the 10 Years Thailand has the backing of Apichatpong Weerasethakul, who has been a total mainstay in the art house cinema landscape. And 10 Years Japan in particular, there was a short in 10 Years Japan called Plant 75, which actually got turned into a feature, and it was shown at the Cannes Film Festival this year, and it got a lot of success, and I believe it is currently Japan's official submission into the Oscars for the Best International Feature Film. So you can see how the 10 Years Project has really gained massive global success and awareness. And the producers, this is totally to the producers' credit, the producers of the original 10 Years Hong Kong, and the vision they had to bring this project worldwide. And yeah, I think it's totally amazing, and it totally rethought how Hong Kong movies, Hong Kong cinema can be distributed and seen.
Yeah, no. I think what you characterize is so true, because I think in the old days, we think about the martial arts, the types of happy violence film, coming from Hong Kong. But now you actually have a much more, critical, political cinema, the 10 years formula, and that could be extremely appealing, outside Hong Kong and also outside the Chinese world.
Right. The filmmakers of 10 Years, the directors, almost all 5 of them have gone on to achieve success in their own personal careers. Most famously is Kiwi Chow, Zhou Gunwei, the director of Self-Immolator, who has gone on to direct the commercial success romance Beyond the Dream, and also, Elephant in the Room, 七代革命, Revolution of Our Times, the documentary that is the kind of definitive documentary on the Hong Kong 2019 protests, and it played in the Cannes Film Festival as well. And Kiwi Chow has totally become maybe the major figure in the current new wave of Hong Kong filmmaking, which has not been defined, but is definitely growing and going on. And also the other directors like Au Man Kit, the director of
The
Dialect. Yes, and he has, he won the Best Director Award from the Hong Kong Film Awards just 1 year later, after 10 years, for Trivisa, 徐代jiu风. And you can also, the other directors all have gained personal success in their careers. And I totally agree with you, and I actually just observed that I also can trace a new style of filmmaking back to 10 years in Hong Kong cinema. I don't want to give 10 years like all the credit, but I do think there is a kind of noticeable mark before and after, where Hong Kong movies nowadays, even though they're not allowed to be, explicitly about politics, about political figures or political plots, all of them carry some kind of political thought behind them much more prominently than before. Like, every movie made in Hong Kong in Cantonese nowadays is called Bun Tou. It's framed as localist and indigenous, and it has these kind of indigenous thoughts behind it. Like, I discussed with in another episode in our podcast, the Far Far Away,緣路山旮旯, which is just a total comedy, but it actually has so much of that native thinking behind the movie. And I think that is a total kind of departure in Hong Kong filmmaking that can be traced back to 10 years, like you said. Unlike the mainstream, wuxia kind of action blockbusters of before, nowadays Hong Kong filmmaking has totally regained a kind of consciousness, and I believe it can be traced back to 10 years.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. Especially this very interesting paradigm shift, towards the local identity and also this localist sentiment. I think it's actually becoming a new normal. I think in the Hong Kong, media industry now, and I think that also helped with the rise of the Hong Kong study, as an academic field. Because I think since the umbrella, since the 2019, people began to rethink the centrality of Hong Kong. Within modern China, but also the centrality of Hong Kong in the global history of nonviolent activism. So I think it actually presents lots of new opportunity for research and also for creative art project.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think even though 10 years can be kind of seen, some people might have kind of forgotten about it or see it as kind of like a relic because it was made before the 2019 protests. I think it really hasn't aged a day, or it has aged supremely well, aged even better than most people could have expected. I mean, this is very bleak and dark, but it's true. And I think 10 years will continue to be a very important political document of the era, worthy of looking back even 20 years, 30 years into the future, even though there are a lot of instantly dated elements in the movie. Like the closing credits, there's like a Facebook logo of the movie, and like nowadays no one uses Facebook anymore. But like it really is. I think those specificities only speak to the authenticity of the movie and make it both a 2015 movie and also a movie that extends far beyond into the future and also the past.
Yeah. No, I would also want to add that I think the film itself it also carry a numbers of universal message across culture and also across time. I think when some of the American students who watch some of the episode in the film, they could easily identify the problem of police brutality with the Black Lives Matters in the United States. So they could easily identify with the victims of police violence in the case of Hong Kong. And even for some of the Chinese international students, when they watch the dialect section, the dialect film, they could think of the loss of Shanghai dialect, the Wenzhou dialect, and also some other regional dialects within China as well. So I think the film, it also speaks to the people who live within the Chinese cultural world, who are also concerned about the disappearance of their local identity and also some of their local characteristics in contemporary China. So I think the film can actually speak to different audience in different time.
Right. I'm also very impressed, like you said, by the inclusion of Southeast Asians in the movie and South Asians in the movie, which have historically been an ethnic minority in Hong Kong, but almost totally neglected by Hong Kong cinema until recent times. And actually, the movie is very welcoming in its inclusion and very kind of liberal friendly, which is surprising considering the kind of conservative streak in Hong Kong, in some arenas of Hong Kong politics. And it's a movie that's totally ready to be shown to the international community, even back in 2015 and nowadays. And I also think you're right that the movie only has more relevance because of the rise of authoritarian politics and right-wing politics in the global sphere and neo-fascism. And I think you're right that a lot of different countries can relate to the problems seen in 10 years because of their own respective leaders in politics and their own messed up situations.
Yeah. No, definitely. I think for the filmmaker themselves and also for the producers, at that time, I think they were much more sensitive to the cultural diversity and also the ethnic diversity, within Hong Kong. So the fact that they also include some of these Southeast Asian and South Asian actors, it also create a kind of cross-racial and also cross-generational solidarity. So I think that part is actually very impressive.
Right. So to wrap this up a little bit, I have some more things to talk about. Let me see. So I think 10 years, to speak a little bit more about its impressive stylistic features to me, I think, like I said in Fao Gua Extras, I really like the black and white in that short. I think it shows the kind of literal political grayness and moral ambiguity of the world in that situation. And like I said, the staging and the framing of that movie, you always have, you in many shots, you have characters, in the upper half of the frame, and then you have characters in the lower half of the frame at the same time. And it totally exhibits this awareness of class politics, even though the movie itself is not necessarily about those things. And I think it is really, you can see the director really has an eye for framing in that short. And then for a lot of people, Dongxim, Season of the End, the second one, is their maybe least favorite one is the most inaccessible one. And I think that's true for me as well. I think when I first watched it, when I was in high school, when it was released, I totally thought it was just some kind of pretentious art house horse shit, and I had no idea what it was about. And even nowadays, I still think it is kind of a little too languorous. But I do think what it talks about, the oblivion, the disappearance, I think it has relevance that maybe totally escaped audiences back in 2015. This idea of preserving Hong Kong culture has gained so much relevance in the last few years, and this is something that I did not consider at all. And then I really like in Fangyin, in Dialect, the kind of more handheld and more casual, more relaxed coverage. I think a lot of student films have this problem of very explicitly designed coverage of you can see the camera angles being designed and planned for the day. But this is not really an issue in 10 years at all. I think all of it has a kind of maturity, maybe not an expert level, maybe not expertise, but definitely a maturity in where to place the camera, and they all flow very naturally. And this is true in Dialect as well, using handheld, and it just totally befits the kind of more slice of life nature of the short. And then obviously you have Self-Immolator, which is the mockumentary, and I think it only works, and it works so well because of how accurately it reimagines the kind of documentary aesthetic of Hong Kong. Television documentaries like Hung Chang Zap, and it almost feels like a real documentary. I think that when I watched it for the first time, and even the second time, I thought those people were real people. I thought the so-called academics in the movie were actually academics working at, CUHK or whatever. And then it was only reading the credits when I found out that, they were all actors. But it needs to be that realistic and authentic to work. And I think the movie totally does. And then finally in Local Egg, like I said, it's a heartwarming kind of cap off to the series. And it actually also kind of predicts some of the issues like migration, the current migration wave of Hong Kongers. In the short, the farmer, he migrates to Taiwan, which back then might not have been really a thing, but nowadays it totally is a trend. And then you can also see the control of the authoritarian government seeping everywhere, even in the classroom. And this is also something that's totally true in the Hong Kong society right now. So I think 10 years, all of them really have some very amazing features, and they're all very worthy of study. And I think the fact that all the directors have gone on to become successful does not surprise me at all, because I think you can see that they are totally talented filmmakers, and this is a film that demonstrates that level of talent. What do you think, Professor Lee?
No, I totally agree with you, because I think about the way they conceptualize each individual shot, and also the cinematic narrative. A few things I just want to add is I think there's one common theme that actually bring all the five production together is the notion of mobility. Okay, the mobility. I think in the first shot, the extra, the lack of mobility among the lower class gang member. I think there was at the end. I think they actually toss a coin to decide their own future. It just revealed a kind of lack of opportunity among some of these, lower class criminal gang member, within the whole government establishment as well. So I think that part actually appealed to many of my students when they saw that. I think they found that to be the most shocking. I think the second one, Seasons of the End, the same challenge for me and also for many of my students. But what actually surprised me is, how could they actually find a city that is so quiet to film? I think that part was actually remarkable. It actually showed us a kind of vanishing reality, a city that is actually disappearing. And that actually reinforced their effort to preserve and also to conserve that historical memory. You're right about the local X and also the dialect. I think there's some kind of comical elements, but at the same time, it also reveals the linguistic dimensions of mobility, and also the international, the migration. How people fail to create a sustainable farming economy, and then they just move on to Taiwan, as an alternative choice. So I think that really take the whole subject about mobility to another level. I think, the Self-Immolator, I think that one is actually the most powerful and also the most, thought-provoking. It really raised a fundamental question about, that kind of highly mobilizing strategy in protests. And at the same time, I think this dilemma between nonviolent resistance, civil disobedience, and also a much more proactive approach to challenge a demanding and also an authoritarian government. So I think that one, I think Self-Immolator, it asks some very deep question about political mobilization and also political engagement.
Yeah, and I think, like I said, the way the short blurs the line between fiction and reality is just totally engrossing and amazing, and it reminds me of some of the works by our masters like Anne Hu and Stanley Kwan, like Yun Ling Yuk, Center Stage by Stanley Kwan, also has those same kind of methods and questioning of itself, and it shows a level of maturity and introspection in the movie. And and I also agree about Extras, Fao Gua, the first one, like the kind of black humor, the dark humor in it, and the huge irony in the way the lower class thinks they can control their fate, but they can't. It actually reminds you of Parasite, and I think it predates Parasite as well. I mean, obviously, Parasite is a whole nother level of amazing kind of execution, but I think you can see, Extras is totally has the same style as well. To wrap up, Professor Lee, do you have any other remaining thoughts you want to share about 10 years or anything?
No, I would say, it is, one of those, important classics, coming from, contemporary Hong Kong film industry, and along with, some other, political documentary on, Joshua Wong on Edward Leung. I think 10 years actually try to help us to reimagine that political intensity, that period of political intensity since 1997.
Right. If there is a genre of Hong Kong protest cinema, which obviously has been going on before, before 10 years and also after 10 years, 10 years is kind of like the grandfather, like nowadays you have like the documentaries on Joshua Wong and Edward Leung, and also Revolution of Our Times, obviously. Nowadays you have so many documentaries, Blue Island, right? And all of these are coming out so fast, and they're all really amazing, and I think they all have 10 years to thank.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I think I think we should definitely give credit, to the 10 Years Project, for creating this new cinematic space, for the future generations of the filmmakers.
Right. So thank you so much for joining us, Professor Lee, today. And thank you, everyone, for listening to our discussion of 10 Years, which is a very important movie. And we hope to see you in the next episode. Thank you. Have a good one.